Hi and welcome to this much requested video. In it we'll take a look at the Splendid Class 9F, also compare the Crosti fitted type with the more standard types. The Standard Class 9F came at the end of the Standard Class build project. Arguably, had they arrived earlier, maybe steam would have survived longer, as these big but attractive locomotives were a game changer, being the pinnacle of the steam engineer's design. You are looking at two of my models. At the end of the running section there will be a service guide for each loco. At the top we have 210 9F Crosti boiler fitted standard class number 92021 made by Hornby, which arrived with me in June 2017 from Rails in a flash sale at £64.99. It is in factory weathered condition, which shows up the wheels and motion really well. Unbelievably, this is part of the railroad range. I noticed it did not have a front vacuum pipe, so I used one of my dad's own creations made of brass and copper wire. Looks okay, doesn't it? On the bottom we have 9F 210 number 92156, made by Hornby again, but this one arrived with me on the 15th of the 7th 2004 from On Tracks of Hertfordshire at £67.80, so actually more expensive than the first one. This is one of their last tender drive locos. It went back to Hornby twice, once in 2005 for a 40 motor and in April 2014 for a warped chassis which was causing the coupling rods to lock up, another victim of Marsac rot. They fitted a brand new chassis for me. The Franco Crosti boiler is a type of boiler used for steam locomotives. It was designed in the 1930s by Franco and Dr. Piero Crosti. Unlike conventional boilers, the heat remaining in the exhaust gases was used to preheat the water supply for the main boiler, using a secondary heat exchanger mechanism. This mechanism, known as the feed water heater, is essentially a secondary boiler that preheated the feed water. It is fed at full boiler pressure into the main boiler via the clack valves. The feed water heater is not designed to produce steam, instead raising the temperature of the feed water. This allows the heater to utilise the remaining energy in the exhaust gases, which would otherwise just be wasted up the chimney. 10 of the BR Standard 9F locomotives were fitted with Franco Crosti boilers in 1955. Like the German 5040, these were 210 tender locomotives with a single feed water heater under the main boiler. The standard chimney was still used for fire raising, although blanked off when running normally. The steam chimney was located on the right hand side, the fireman's side, just forward of the firebox. This can be seen on the model. The Crosti preheaters provided less improvement than had been expected and were a problem for maintenance owing to the acidic flue gases condensing in the feed water heater and causing corrosion. All were converted back to a more standard form within a few years. However, the preheaters remained in place but were blanked off. B4 class Guernsey is seen shunting the yard just before our standard 9F passes by on a long unfitted coal train. 9Fs were regular performers on long slogs with heavy trains. As you can see, this tender drive model performs really well. As our coal train passes by, we get our first chance to see the Crosti fitted 9F in action on a very attractive mixed tank wagon train. The model is super smooth and powerful, which really does beg the question, why is it in the railroad range? Sit back now and enjoy both these fine locomotives in action, with real sound from Love steamOK's YouTube channel. A link to his great video is in this video's information box. our Crosti 9F backs into the yard to attach to a fast perishable freight train of bananas. The model displays amazing running flexibility passing through this tight crossover with no snagging or derailing at all. Amazing given a long wheelbase. The little B4 now fights with a weighty transfer freight before we see our normal standard 9F passing by with an express passenger train. Well built for freight, these locomotives were regular and capable performers on passenger duties. So that's the running session over. Now we will have a look at keeping these models in good running order. Right, so opening the Crosti boilered 9F. You need to remove the front pony truck, which is easy. There is a spring there which appears to be captive, which is good. You need to remove the screw there, and that one is a sort of flat-headed affair. Panhead screw, is it? And then you need to remove the screw at the back, and that one is a countersunk one, so don't mix them up. And once you get the body off, this is what you have inside. Now, absolutely flooded in lubricant, which has gone all over the body because it seeps out onto the sort of polythene liner they put in, which I'm going to do away with and put in a tissue one. And but it doesn't sound like it's on the gears enough, so that's why I've opened her. Back of the motor is going to be a pain to get at to lubricate. We'll see what's involved. I suspect we're going to undo that little screw there to remove this ballast piece. Always a nuisance to lubricate these locos. Well, that fooled me. At this end is the flywheel, so clearly the gear train is that end, which means it might be driving on the back axle. Not marvellous with all those wheels to drive off one there. You're really getting some strain on that coupling rod and bearing. So we do have a little flywheel. It's quite a lot of effort. Bear in mind this is a railroad model. It's quite a lot of effort gone into including a flywheel. So indeed that was correct. The gear is under here. I think it's driving on the back axle. But whilst there's oil everywhere, there is nothing at all on the gears. As you can see inside, on the outside, yes, plenty. Inside, not even a splash. And this is why she was grinding a little bit. So perhaps I just spray them over with oil when they make them now. Interesting to know what would be under there. But to remove the motor, obviously just move both of these ends. Good motor, I think these aren't too bad as memory goes. So we're going to lubed up, and I suspect it'll run a lot nicer. The bottom plate is these ones which doesn't really reveal much. 3 screws, excess oil, which I'm going to clean up. But to get to the bearings, and yeah, I think we're going to have to remove that one as well. We'll have a look. Oh, actually I can see the gear down there. It's actually bone dry. Oh well, press on, like, press on. The camera's focusing. Right, so we're not driving on the back axle, we're driving on the one in front of it, which is a little bit better. Been better to drive on the middle one, but that can't be helped. The gears are bone dry. The axles, I've got proper bearings, which is cool. And there's lubricant on them, so I didn't really need to carry on in there. And the pickup strip is off. I'm just going to clean up, lubricate the gears, and that's all she should need. Right, so she's back in. Bit of a struggle. Seems to resist around about here. I found it easier to put the chassis right way up on the table and then put the body down on top. Seemed to work. Now we've already seen that we're driving on this pair of wheels, which means that by the time you get here, that's quite a lot of work for this coupling rod to be doing, and it's working for real life. So it is absolutely essential with 10 coupled locos, or 8 coupled, or even 6 coupled locos, that these points are oiled. This is your crank pin, otherwise you're going to get wear. So just like the real loco, which have oiling points with corks in, and the driver would go around and oil each one pretty much before the start of each journey usually, particularly if it's a long one. It's essential that we keep these oiled with a light oil, plastic safe light oil. Not flooded, but they must be oiled, because if you run them dry you're going to get wear, and it will soon fail because there's a lot of work done on this little point here. It's very thin. The coupling rod actually does work. It's not, you know, it's not gears all the way along like it was a DJ model. The coupling rods are working. Also, we've got to make sure that there's none of this gets bent. Very easy to pick her up and bend that in, all this one. And equally, we've got to make sure that all these little bits are oiled as well, particularly the slide bar. We want it to do as least amount of work as possible to preserve it. So I'm going to crack on with that, and then we'll have a test run. Silky smooth, really nice. Fully assembler, and she can then take part in the video. So we're now looking at the next 9F, and you know what? Can you guess why I don't need to open the body? That's because she's a tender drive version. The motor's in the tender, and this is the one that had to go back to Hornby twice and came back with a brand new chassis because they discovered, due to Marsac rot, that the first chassis had warped. But nonetheless, we must still make sure that all the crank pins are oiled, just like on a real loco, and all the slide gear, valves and slide gear, because don't forget the motor's pushing this, so whilst it picks up, it's also dead weight. And another consideration is to make sure that the surfaces here where the pin goes through are clean, and the same for the little comb underneath, because that contacts onto the pin on the tender to take the power through. So basic oily jobs, anything that moves will be very sparingly oiled, and then we'll open up the tender to have a look at the motor and see how that's doing. So the tender top just unclips, making it nice and easy, and then we have the motor. It's always disappointing to see it's so tight without the bearing. They just rely on the armature shaft sticking through the polythene, so it's very important to keep that lubricated. Doesn't look too bad, a little bit dry, but she's been in store for a long time. What do we like underneath? Traction tyres are all in place, got to have them, otherwise she's got no chance of getting anywhere near prototypical pulling power. So it looks at the moment like just a little bit of a re-lube. Let's connect the controller up and see how it runs anyway. So, just my opinion, but my chosen lubricant for these type of mixed bearings, mixed gears, where you've got plastic and brass and plastic, is currently Lavelle 106. I would have used Hobby Lube gear lube, and there's nothing wrong with that. But this micro grease is absolutely fantastic. Doesn't dry out, and it's got PTFE with it. I will get it the right way around, which really helps to lubricate. So instead of putting oil there, I'm going to put some of that grease there, so that it shouldn't creep onto the brushes then, and it'll also make that bearing last as long as possible.